I am a 35 years old female. I don't have the best relationship with my husband's mom. Since day one she tried to make remarks and compare me to her. She then tried to get on my good side and started overly praising everything I do and sometimes even copying me, like that one time when she dyed her hair purple just like mine, and when everyone pointed out how ridiculous she looked. She actually blamed me and accused me of trying to make a joke out of her. So, anyways, my husband and I took 2 weeks off work to go visit some places out of the country, tourism in other words. Thing is, I was the one who saved up for and arranged for the trip. My husband was responsible for booking the tickets. My husband's mom wanted to come along and threw temper tantrums when I said no. She called, texted, sent people to talk to me into letting her come. Even threatened to call the police and make some complaint up to get us to stay if she can't come. My husband said we should just take her, but I told him he was wrong to tell her about the trip in the first place. He gave me an ultimatum. Said he wouldn't go if she can't come, and I told him I'd gladly call his bluff, which made him take his words back and say, fine. I will tell her to stop it because we won't take her. Things got quieter, suspiciously quieter. The day of the trip came and we got to the airport at 2 p.m. My husband was walking ahead of me and was looking left and right like he was looking for someone. I asked him, but he didn't respond. He led me to the waiting area, and first thing I saw was his mom standing there with her luggage. I froze in my spot. I felt a cold wave washing over me and I was fuming inside. She and my husband were hugging. That's when I quietly turned around and started walking towards the exit. My husband followed me while shouting at me to stop. He tried to stop me, but I told him off the harshest way possible. He tried to say I was overreacting and that his mom was there anyway and I should let it go and not mess the trip up for us. I told him he and his mom could still go and that I was going home. I went home and sobbed into my dog's fur for several minutes. Turned out he booked her a ticket without me knowing. An hour later he came home yelling and raging about how pathetic and spiteful I was to walk out and go home and ruin the trip last minute. I told him he caused this to happen. He said that I was being so hard on his mom, it's ridiculous. I refused to fight anymore, but he kept on berating me, then called my family to tell them that the trip was cancelled, and that it was because of me. My family said that I shouldn't have ruined it for myself and should have sucked it up and done my best to enjoy. When my sister, Annie, was 18 and I was 21, she got pregnant and had a daughter, Sophie. She developed what we believe was postpartum depression, but was never diagnosed as she refused therapy. When Annie's school started up again, our mother took on all childcare of Sophie. As Mum took on more childcare, Annie seemed more like her old self, happy, outgoing, generally mentally healthy. Then within 6 months of Sophie's birth, Annie got pregnant again with another girl, Laura, and the cycle of PPD symptoms. Mum taking over, and Annie's mood improving repeated. When Laura was 2 and Sophie was 3, Annie decided to move out of our parents' home, alone, and said she wanted our parents to adopt / raise her daughters. They said no. Annie said she couldn't take care of the girls as she had her own life and being a parent made her miserable. My husband and I already had 4 kids of our own. We'd bonded with the girls, and we had the resources for 2 more. So we offered to take them in, and Annie let us legally adopt them before moving about 8 hours away. It's been about 5 years, and the kids are doing well. It was a rough start, but we're now a stable, loving, healthy family unit. Sophie and Laura are 7 and 8, and Annie has recently lost her job and had to move back in with our parents. Annie has now asked for custody of Sophie and Laura. I'm writing custody like that because it wouldn't be custody in the legal sense. As she willingly surrendered all legal rights to the girls and can't get them back, we checked with a lawyer. However, Annie wants the girls to live with her. Initially she said she wanted them full-time and to legally adopt them back from us, which we obviously refused. Then she offered a compromise of alternate weeks, so 50 / 50 custody. Again, we refused. Given her insistence, we don't even want her around Sophie and Laura. So we've not been going by my parents' house as we typically do. It's been a month of constant badgering, insisting we let Annie bond with her daughters and allow her to at the very least take them for overnight visits, saying that Annie had PPD 5 years ago. And now she's ready to be a parent. I've responded that we are not babysitters, we are Sophie and Laura's parents. They're in a good place and this will be detrimental to all 6 kids. And Annie doesn't get to step in now when she never stepped up in the first place. The response from my parents and Annie is that I'm being unsympathetic to her PPD and I should let her at least have a chance, rather than deem her unfit without giving her a chance to prove herself. Plus, given that we already have 4 kids other than them, Sophie and Laura could probably do with a smaller household, and saying we're being unreasonable for not allowing Annie to bond with her kids. My brother lost his job along with all his savings several months ago, and soon after he asked me if it would be okay if he and his wife stayed with me until they could afford their own place again. I hesitated at first, considering I only have a 1-bedroom apartment, but according to them they had no other options, so of course I invited them over and bought a blow-up mattress for the living room. For the first month things were manageable, although admittedly cramped. Then my brother told me that sleeping on the mattress was giving him back pains. So he asked if he could buy a small double bed for the living room. The living room is by far the biggest room I have, so I told him that would be fine as long as there was still room for my couch, TV, bookshelves. The living room is also connected to my kitchen in an open plan style. So I reminded my brother to leave walking space around the bed. It's now been 2 months and things have gotten a lot worse. When they first moved in, I would still use the living room every day to unwind on the couch after work. Now whenever I go in, there's a strange vibe like I'm intruding. My brother and his wife are often sitting in bed together when I go in. I always knock and stare at me pointedly until I leave. Sometimes when I sit down they will directly ask me for some alone time and say they would like the room to themselves. This came to a head yesterday when my sister-in-law messaged me with a timetable she'd made of when it would be a good time for me to use the living room. The timetable basically says that they will allow me into the room for an hour each evening, plus 20 minutes around meal times. I basically shut her down instantly and told her there was no way I'd be following the timetable since in the end it's my apartment. She sent me back a huge message with a dozen paragraphs about how my constant presence was ruining her marriage with my brother and they feel like they have no privacy. I tried to talk this over with my brother that night, but when I got home neither my brother //SIL were talking to me. So he's clearly just as pissed. Today an Amazon parcel arrived for my brother with a lock for the living room door, which I told him there's absolutely no way I will allow him to install. My brother says I'm creepy for wanting constant access to where they sleep and he's insisting on installing the lock anyway. My boyfriend started asking to join me in my girls' night in. Every time I tried to say no he'd be like, I have to join or you'll have to cancel. It made me and the girls miserable having to sit there with him in the middle. This past Friday he insisted to join us again. I had enough. I came up with an idea to get him to hate hanging out with us. Made a plan and told the girls what we were going to do and they were down for OT. The girls came and my boyfriend immediately sat with us and started ruining our conversations by steering them towards him / his work / his achievement. So here's what I did. I started bringing up gross / embarrassing subjects and the girls were eating them up by talking about them in details. Subjects like sevks, periods, his most sensitive spot, cramp diarrhea, hairy legs, fart getting trapped in the vulva and coming out the front, squeezing shit out of our faces, cramp diarrhea, dirty underwear, and again, cramp diarrhea. We talked about this stuff in boring details, like I could feel his discomfort without even looking at him. But God, when I turned to see why he got quiet suddenly, he was getting red in the face and had sweat all over his forehead. I bet he found himself unable to relate to thy subject, thus couldn't take part in the conversation. He got up from the couch ready to head out. I looked at him and asked where he was going and he was like, I just remembered that I have an important meeting with a guy in about 10 minutes and I have to go now. He rushed out telling us to have fun. The girls and I started laughing hysterically. He came home and berated me saying I made him feel uncomfortable / sick with the horrible subjects I kept bringing. I said, what you talking about? This is the typical stuff girls talk about all the time, but he insisted I made him upset and caused him to leave. He declined to speak to me and been quiet since then. This is his apartment, he tells me who is and isn't allowed to come and I thought this was fine since it's his place. Though I help with the bills, But he makes so much more as the head of security in his company, so that's that. I just can't believe how dense and blind I've been to his negative ways. He's still giving me the silent treatment, and I've decided it's just a lot to take. And so I'm temporarily moving in with one of the girls and will now be definitely reconsidering few things.